All right, thanks for joining me. I'm Jocelyn with Sprockets, and so I'm sharing today about how we this summer used Google Sites as a way to support young people in virtual learning. No, well, I get it was learning, but it was virtual youth employment programs. So I'm sure many of you are familiar, but Right Track has our youth employment program in St. Paul. And it was really a shift for them this summer, trying to figure out like how to get young people paid and learning. And they did a lot of other really cool things as well with some online learning piece. But Sprockets had committed to work with 10 young people in virtual work from home kind of space. And their role was it was the trusted advocates. And so they were working to create positive messaging around COVID to share with other young people in the community. And so we were really struggling to figure out how do we make sure that we're supporting them. It's hard enough for all of us to figure out how do you work from home and balance all of the distractions. And so how do we support young people with that? And with some accountability, but also some autonomy, because they would be working independently in some small groups. And so we didn't really know what we were going to do, but as I was trying to plan, thought about Google Sites, and I had not actually seen Google Sites for a really long time, but wasn't sure if it was still around, but it was. And so I'm going to kind of walk through today how we set up our Google Sites page for this group of young people. And the other piece around that is kind of some of the intentionality we had around that, and I'll talk about what kind of worked and what we adapted along the way as well. So this was considered our home page. We call this our virtual office, and so this is where they could go to find any information. Everything we talked about was housed here. In reality, this home page was probably the least used page because the navigation bar across the top was probably more helpful. But as we were welcoming them into their position, they didn't necessarily know what all was about. So we did put in, what were the key points that we had talked about in terms of the job description and those kind of pieces. These are also, just like the navigation bar, they were links to other pages, but trying to make them young or fun, or, just kind of have some personality. Again, I don't know how often those were used. And then as we worked together, we would include some documents here that they could refer back to. So for example, on our first week, we talked about, group strategies. And I don't know, is this, did the screen change? Are you seeing the community group agreements? Do you still see
change it. Yeah.
Okay, oh good, thanks. So like we made group agreements, and so we posted those on the front page, as well as kind of how our production cycle would work. And then as we developed other small groups, it was kind of confusing, right? They had not met each other. And so we had those kind of things listed here, along with just different announcements and things that were either pertinent to their work or that we thought they would just find interesting. So that was kind of the homepage. What we used a lot was this schedule. And so when we first started, I had like an example schedule. So our group met every morning. This was example of our last week, but we had a morning huddle at the beginning of each day and the end of the day huddle at the end of our shift. And so we knew that we were going to break up the time in kind of a certain way, but it would change a little bit from day to day. And by the end of the first week, it was clear that having an example schedule and just talking about it at the beginning of the day was not going to be enough. So we each week would update here exactly how we're going to spend the time. So just as an example, we would have our morning huddle. Then they would have like 45 minutes to work on their own on whatever projects they were working on. We always scheduled in their break. And then we would have some time for them to be either in their specialty teams or project teams. So trying to kind of carve out the time. The other piece though is we would always let them know, like as you need to during individual time, you could reach out to each other, things like that. And then when the first couple of weeks, I would have to say we actually were really structured in terms of what they were doing during specific times. But as their groups started to form and have their projects that they were working on, then it became more flexible. So we may have a specific day where it was, you know, you've got 3 hours to take your break and work on your individual work or your small groups, and you can self-organize. So that was another piece of it. The other thing that actually was really helpful is that we had the links. So each of these things is hyperlinked either to our pages where we would meet with them when we met in small groups, and we always had the same morning huddle and end of the day huddle link, which actually was the same link. I just put it there. One of the things you'll notice is that some of their names are hyperlinked as well. So we were working with young people, some of which actually were over 18 as well, but in an employment piece. And so they would host each other in their own Google rooms for small groups. And so depending on program and your structure and your content and what your policies are around that, that may or may not be something that programs would do, especially if you're working with younger kids. But for us in this youth employment piece, they would organize and do their small group activities together in rooms that they hosted. So then we had a page with teams materials. And so we had some contacts that they were having to reach out to. So we clarified who those were and hyperlinked them. The goal was to have, we could email things out, but they don't all check their emails. And I know for myself, when I get a ton of emails and have to go search for things, it's really harder to stay organized. So we really structured it to make things easy and organized for them as possible. And then we have Google Docs. And so the different folders that they would use that either had information we were giving them or as they were working on products. So again, they were working like memes or videos, things like that. They could save them in these folders and be able to work and get back to those things. We had the staff roster, so they could access everybody's phone numbers and emails that they needed to. We had project reflections. So at the end of each week, they would download that, fill it out, and then upload it. We had a project upload link so that it goes to a different folder that they don't all have access to. And so when I talk about having access to these, and especially when I know one of the concerns was about you know, we have their schedule. So some of these have their own links or our links for our meetings. And we had a community engagement team page that had like their bios and their contact information along with ours. Those were our high school pictures as we were helping to support these high school young folks. It was their concern about privacy, and we don't want just anybody coming to these pages. And so I'll also show you how we did that to make sure it was just our group that was accessing this in a minute. We also had a page for LRNG, so that was through Right Track. They had some online learning that they had to do, so we would just post those there. A couple other things just to think about with programming. Again, this was for youth employment and kind of like our office space, but I think some of these things would apply to other youth programming things. Is we had a gallery, and so as we worked on different initiatives, we would save them here so we could look back and reflect on them, or just to know that we had them. So for example, the header for this page was a Mentimeter that we did one of the first days. So we were going to be talking about public service announcements. And so, having them share in this word cloud, what are some of the issues in community that are important to them? And then their first project then was to create a public service announcement about something that's important to them. And then as a way to, progressively scaffold to them creating public service announcements around specifically COVID. We had our introduction, they all submitted pictures that represent them. And so we use that to introduce each other. On our first day, we used Jamboard a lot. And so I know that's a resource that I've talked about in other videos, but as a reflection for working at home. And so each of them that first week read an article. We had about 10 different articles they each read, and then presented back to the group what did they learn about best practices for working at home. And then they did some reflection about what do they have, I've got this, things that they felt comfortable with, and what are some things they need to work on in terms of like the space that they had or structure or different things like that. Again, we did, I think, our own leadership styles. They created some feedback around public health campaigns as they searched them, just different activities. So this was kind of a fun way to like archive some of the work that we were doing together. And then we also had done some speaker series. And so we talked a lot about building their network. So anyone who came and talked to them, we put all their information. So they had, it's kind of like their little Rolodex. And then a frequently asked questions, which there actually wasn't that many, but as we were anticipating what some might be, we put those things on. And I don't know that any of them ever actually had to visit this, but it was nice to have there. So people can schedule, you know, you can create these to be any way you want, or any topics, or resources, different pieces like that. And it's really easy to use. But I wanted to show, so this is the edit button. So this allows for me on the back end to add or move things around. And it's really user friendly. And so, for example, each of these things here, you can change the image for, or you can change the hyperlink in those things. It's pretty intuitive. There, you can add text, image, drive, or embed a link. And so one of the things that, actually, I don't think I saw it on the top, I was going to talk about, was we had, oh, shout outs. So one of the things is we had a shout out board. And so we were talking about gratitude and how much it is, it's important to be thankful for people who've contributed to your learning or for your own self. And so using Mentimeter, we created a shout out board, and each week we would put a shout out board on here. And so they would go, we'd say at the end of the day huddle, hey, make sure you go to the shout out board and give a shout out to somebody that was helpful today. And so we did this pretty structured for a couple of weeks. This is the one I put the example back in from week 1. What we did notice is that less and less people were using it because it was optional. We did ask them to go do it, but you know, we weren't holding accountability around it, just trying to change, you know, have a culture of gratitude. So at one point we did a survey out to folks about whether or not we thought we should keep the shout out board. And we also had them go through each of the different tabs on the website. And in their small groups, they had a list of like, what do they think that page is for? Does it meet that goal? What suggestions do they have? So getting their feedback to adapt our virtual office. And then one of the young people took all those results, compiled them into recommendations, and then I provided her access to do the editing. So we ended up disabling the shout out board page and instead did the shout outs at our end of the day meeting. But I think this was a great foundation when they did, because they didn't know each other originally. It's kind of hard to do shout outs, you know, with people you don't know. And honestly, a lot of the times when we met, not everyone had their camera on. So just that's a fun way. So all I would do is put embed, and then you can put the embed code, which, since I'm talking about this, I'm just going to toggle over here quick. Mentimeter, if you're not familiar, I use the free version, and you can create slides. So this one was about getting an audience to know each other. I don't remember which event that one was from. But if you want to share it, so if I wanted to include this one on there so people could see it, I just go to presentation sharing and then embed presentation and copy this code. So that was how I was able to get it to show like in real time. So that is only open for a week. This code is only works for a week. And so each week we would just put a new page in. So I thought that was kind of a nice way to put something out there where they could be sharing with each other throughout the week on their, you know, even when we weren't meeting together. In terms of the privacy I mentioned, so here's where you can share it with others. And so that page was not open. I have it so it's not open, but then I could add in people that I wanted to be able to access it. And you can have them published as a viewer or an editor. So if I was to share this link with you, you wouldn't be able to see all the information. But if I invited you individually, then you could be able to see it either as a viewer, so showing it the way that that I had shown before when it was in the kind of presentation mode, or here it's in the editing mode. So this is how I would go back to preview. So most of them were able to see it this way, but we did have the one young person who was able to go in and do some of those edits as well. So I guess mainly I just wanted to share. The other thing is that it's interesting because depending on which tab that I'm in, let's see, this is not really what I want here. I couldn't find, you know, normally if you, let's see, go to Google. In Google, if you go to this like waffle up here and you click it, like I have sites right here when I'm signed in as myself. When I'm signed in as Sprockets, I cannot find this link and without going all the way down to more from Google and going all the way down the page to find it. But it is really just sites.google.com. And it's kind of cool because they have these different templates. I haven't actually even looked through all these templates. The one that I used is this project. And so, let's see, is it, here we go. so this is what it looks like before you do anything with it. And then you can just add things by using, you know, inserting. They have different layout options. You can insert pages. They have some different themes and styles to play with as well, you know, for folks who kind of like to do that. But so that is it. It was really just to kind of show how we used it. Some of the things that were lessons learned for me is, I think, again, I mentioned the schedule, like really having it detailed. We talked about it each morning. And then sometimes we would co-create the schedule for the day. So I'd be typing it in. But then there's like that publish button. So any changes you make don't show up for the viewer until you publish it. And so that was an important reminder. It was great to have their feedback because a couple of reasons. Having them go through and analyze each page and kind of critique it provided an opportunity for them to navigate through it more, which I don't know that they really had been. So that was important too. It does make it accessible for phone or tablet, and so it shows you what the views would look like there as well. And like I said, that the shout out thing, we did it. It served its purpose, and then we unpublished that page. I published it again just for this demo, but so that it wasn't coming up. So it was really helpful for us. And as we were doing reflections with the young people at the end, and I will say that we have a page on our website that shows the work they do. So I got to give a shout out quick. They made some amazing videos and some great memes and stuff. But we also did a presentation and they recorded kind of some of their reflections. And there was a number of folks that talked about having that structure and having that information was really helpful for them in terms of accountability and working home and kind of revisiting their schedules. So that is mainly it. I would gladly answer questions now that you might have, or certainly you can email or reach out at any time as well. But I wanted to share that with you and see, you know, if there's ways. Again, ours was unique in that it was a youth employment for a specific age group, but thinking of programs, whether they make it open with resources and links, or even just using it for a small group of young people who are working on a project and can have that information and work asynchronously when you're not together and have kind of that place to go to, I think was kind of helpful.